that are much more stable and much more spared this epidemic than other areas of states.
Are you concerned, though, that if you have already 4 states not following the guidelines that you laid out, more states appear to be ready to possibly do that as well, that we end up losing all the ground that we've gained over the last 6 weeks?
I've had really very good conversations with a series of governors, and they've really been very insightful of how they're looking at this. They understand the risk, and they talk about this not as turning on a light switch, but slowly turning up the dimmer, very slowly. And that's why these are in phases, and each phase carries a very specific piece. And to all the American people, please read those phases, because it was very clear that if you have pre-existing conditions, or you're the elderly with pre-existing conditions and have risk factors, we strongly recommended that you continue to shelter in place and continue to be protected and continue to follow all the guidelines. And anybody that you interact with, ensure that they're also following the guidelines very carefully.
Well, now that actually gets me to my next topic with you, and that is the issue of testing. I'd actually, instead of me asking the question, I'd like to get you to respond to Bill Gates. Here's what he said to a colleague of mine yesterday on the testing issue.
Of all the things I'm most surprised about the federal government response, the unwillingness to get involved in test prioritization is the most amazing. We have 330 million people, and our testing capacity is under 200,000 a day.
Birx, I know you have had your own, you've worked with the Gates Foundation in the past, so I should set that aside there a second. How would you respond to him?
I think he's very clearly, there's a piece of us that have worked together to do 2 things. And I think what's really important is for the American public to understand how we're doing these tests right now. Uniquely, we're using nucleic acid testing. What does that mean? You're actually sampling for the live virus in people's nose or in people's throats. And then you have to expand that doing what we call nucleic acid testing. So this is not like a flu test or a strep test. So when we talked to the commercial companies almost 8 weeks ago, we asked every single corporation and every single diagnostic company that had nucleic acid testing capacity on their platforms, which is primarily HIV and HPV, and makes tests for those platforms. And in less than 2 to 3 weeks, every single one of these platforms are up and running. Now, what we did with the states, and I think what Mr. Gates points out very clearly, is what did we do with the states to ensure that we've identified all those platforms? And over a week ago, we sent out to states every single platform where it was located, over 5,000 platforms across the states, and showing geographically and by zip code where they're located. That's allowing us to work closely with the states to unlock that full potential and to prioritize first states that have had outbreaks, but also states that need to do active surveillance, what we talked about, asymptomatic surveillance, to really find cases before people have symptoms. And that's what we're doing right now with every single state.
Look, the debate about testing, and I know the president gets defensive and claims that testing has been a success story. What it does feel as if there's a hesitance to use the Defense Production Act in order, whether it's swabs, whether it's getting these reagents, whether it's forcing these labs to process things faster, guaranteeing some funding for it. Why the hesitance inside that task force?
I think all of those pieces are discussed with inside the task force, from generation of swabs to generation of tubes and the media. I think what people don't see behind the scenes is how FDA have worked with corporations to really change the number of swabs that can be utilized. If you remember, just 4 weeks ago, we were recommending these nasopharyngeal swabs, and we've moved to multiple different swabs, multiple different extraction media. The intent is to continue to scale with the support of states and working with states to continue to scale testing. But at the same time, we have to realize that we have to have a breakthrough innovation in testing. We have to be able to detect antigen rather than constantly trying to detect the actual live virus or the viral particles itself, and to really move into antigen testing. And I know corporations and diagnostics are working on that now. We have to have a breakthrough. This RNA testing will carry us certainly through the spring and summer, but we need to have a huge technology breakthrough, and we're working on that at the same time.
So essentially what you're saying is you don't think we have the capacity to ramp up the testing you would like because we need this, we basically need a breakthrough for easier testing?
No, I think we have other technology that we think can come online within the next 2 to 3 weeks that will be a breakthrough in the RNA type testing. But I think also just for ease of use, finding out how we can do antigen type testing like they do with flu. It can be used as a screening test, and then you could do the actual RNA testing for a confirmatory test. Just allows you to screen large numbers of individuals quickly.
The vice president on Friday said that by Memorial Day, in fact, I want to read the quote exactly here, that by Memorial Day, the epidemic, I think honestly, if you look at the trends today, that I think by Memorial Day weekend, we will largely have this coronavirus epidemic behind us. This Memorial Day 2020, is that realistic, that it's behind us? Can you explain what he means by that?
I think he means that in the models and in tracking our actual data, because previously we were using models based on data from around the world, and now we're very much tracking every single outbreak in the United States separately. And if you look at those outbreaks over time, and you look at places like Louisiana, if you look at Houston, if you look at Detroit, and you look at how they've reached their peak and come down and what those cases look like as they come down, it gives us great hope when you project out Boston and Chicago and certainly the New York Metro, which we're all very still focused on. I mean, they still have 45% or so of the entire cases in the United States, and the majority, about 40 to 50% of the mortality. So we continue to watch this very closely, but that's where the projections take us, and it's very much based on Detroit, Louisiana, and other groups. And then looking at Seattle that never really reached a peak and has never really had a large outbreak, and trying to understand what we can do as a people to ensure social distancing will be with us through the summer to really ensure that we protect one another as we move through these phases.
Dr. Birx, help me understand what happened with the suggestion that the president made that the task force study disinfectant injections. You said he was digesting information at the time when that came out of his mouth. Do you have any more information, and are you concerned that people might take bleach because of what the president said?
I think I made it very clear and how I interpreted that. I also made it very clear, and so has Dr. Fauci and everyone associated with the task force, and their clarity around this is not a treatment. What was missed, and really I'm hoping the American people understand the reason why that study was important that Department of Homeland Security did, was when we came and saw what MIT talked about as viral particles moving through the air. It's really important to figure out in the outside conditions, is there anything that decreases the half-life of that virus? And I think I was reassured personally to see what impact sunlight has on the virus and the viral half-life. That should be encouraging to all of us. We should still social distance. We should still wear those masks to protect others as we work through this epidemic. But I think it's really important to see that sunlight, direct sunlight, may actually be able to kill the virus.
Are you concerned the credibility of the scientists on the task force get undermined when the president, now with bleach, obviously you can't do that, and hydroxychloroquine, where the FDA to put out a statement? I mean, is this undermining the credibility of you and Dr. Fauci and other scientists?
I think all of us are very clear in our discussions with the American people how we're looking and utilizing data to drive decision making within the task force. Every day about 2:30 in the morning, I get every single piece of data coming in from every county where we triangulate where is the virus moving, how are people responding to the virus, are we considering absolutely everything to protect American people, and triangulating that data to come up with that day's work. Where should PPE go? Where should we be really talking with governors about a recent outbreak? How do we protect individuals that are essential services? This is the discussion of the task force, and the physicians
not attacking the president.
The individuals involved in the task force are every day focused on what's the most recent scientific evidence. And I think what really the American people should understand is in the guidelines that the NIH recently published, really helpful, were put up this week to really talk about how to clinically approach this. But we've had really critical data that has come to the forefront over the last few days about how this virus is interacting with people in the United States. And I think that's really critical. We need to constantly be focusing on what we're learning to save more lives and to make our treatment more effective.
Dr. Birx, I have to leave it there. I appreciate you coming on and sharing the administration's view. Stay safe and healthy yourself.
Not the president. They don't want to talk to the president.
When we come back,
they just want to talk to everybody but the president.
State in the country, as well as to an infectious disease expert who says we haven't fully grasped how profound a crisis we're facing. And as we go to break this Sunday morning, images of a pandemic, beginning with the new look from members of the House of Representatives.
Is that we are still a number of weeks away. The fatalities continue to be significant each and every day. Our positive test curve has flattened, and that's a good thing. More importantly, hospitalizations have started to come down. ICU and ventilator use down a little bit. Those are good signs, but we're not out of the woods yet. I think we're several weeks away, and the big mantra, and our state's done a really good job of this, I have to say. I give a shout out to our residents. The mandate to stay at home and stay away from each other is still very much in effect until we can break the back of this curve.
Have you decided if you're going to have a statewide order that will essentially govern everybody the same, or do you think you're going to cordon off? You've got South Jersey. You're going to have the Jersey Shore may have one set of timelines and reopening, and of course Northern New Jersey with another. What path do you imagine taking on a reopening?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The metro New York counties up in our northeast part of the state have been crushed. But it's important to note that we've got positive test results in each of our 21 counties. And sadly, we have fatalities in each of our 21 counties. So while we haven't made that decision, we have as a healthcare matter, this is a month or 6 weeks ago, separated the state into regions, north, central, and south. That has proven to be effective. We just opened up with the Army Corps a field medical station in Atlantic City in the south last week. So I suspect, Chuck, while we haven't made a decision on that, we're going to move as one state, recognizing you've got density issues in the north that you just don't have in the south.
You're going to be needing some money from the federal government. You know, it looks like it's going to be probably a little bit of a back and forth inside of Congress. If you don't get a federal bailout or federal reimbursement money, what are the first services do you think you'd have to start cutting back on if the federal government either limited or didn't give you some money to deal with this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, let me say this. We've had constructive conversations and exchanges, and we're on with the White House morning, noon, and night on health care, on testing, on financial matters. I have to reiterate what Senator McConnell said about letting states go bankrupt was both irresponsible and not factual. And to your question, we won't go bankrupt, but we'll gut the living daylights out of things like educators, first responders, the very folks we desperately need. This is the healthcare crisis of all time in our country's history. We need states to be fully funded at the point of attack, being there for our residents. And so we need a big slug, not just New Jersey. There's a bill Senator Menendez and Senator Cassidy, I might add bipartisan, has sponsored for $500 billion. That's exactly what the doctor ordered.
Governor, one of the challenges that I feel like is going to be unique to both you and Governor Cuomo is this issue of when Manhattan can open up. And when, as somebody pointed out to me, you might be able to create office space that is socially distanced. You can phase people in, but how do you get on the New Jersey trains with social distancing and run enough trains to make it work? How do you get on the subway and still have social distancing? This mass transportation issue in the age of social